Hello and welcome to Cold Red. I'm producer Bianca Crespo, and I'm joined by James R. Fitzgerald, an American criminal profiler, forensic linguist, and author. He's a retired FBI agent, best known for capturing the Unabomber. I'm also joined by Raymond J. Carr, criminal profiler, teacher, author, and retired FBI agent, who is most known for the capture of the most prolific bank robber in history. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bianca. Great to be back.
Hi, Bianca. Thanks for having us again.
Nice to see you both. I hope you all had a very restful spring break / Easter weekends. I know since we last spoke, we've been getting a lot of messages on social media regarding our curious viewers and listeners. And they want to know, all the pressing questions like, what do you eat for breakfast? If you prefer white or wheat. So yeah, how about we start there? Which do you prefer?
Who?
White or wheat? Oh, you first.
Oh, me. Well, let me start out. I'm wearing an older shirt. I'm going to explain that in a few minutes, but I'm wearing it for a purpose. I only wear it once or twice a year, and unlike Ray, who wears older shirts for different reasons. But this has.
Jim, we're just thankful you have a shirt on today.
Well, we won't go with what we're thankful you have on today.
Okay.
But anyway, this has some memories for me back from the Unabomber case. Some of you may be able to see it, but I'll explain it a bit later. Okay, yeah. If you're really serious about that, but I get these questions from fans too, and that's cool. I do like breakfast in the morning. They said it's the best or the most important meal of the day. I usually have a half bagel with different spreads on it. And people are surprised about this. I'm a former police officer and, of course, FBI agent. I do not drink coffee. I have never had a cup of coffee in my entire life. As a little kid, I sipped my parents. Ew, that tastes awful. And I just never developed a taste for it. So I like a good 16 ounces of juice in the morning. I guess the sugar gets my system going. And then I always have a cold iced tea for lunch. So that's where I get my midday caffeine going. So we'll stick with the morning starts for now. And that's basically it for me. I'm also, when I do my workouts, I'm a late afternoon workout person. I think Ray and I are opposite in that regard. I don't like morning workouts. I've done them, but not my preferred time to get sweaty or swim a mile in the pool like I've been doing lately. Ray, tell us about your life.
Jim, do you really get that many laps in your bathtub?
It's a big bathtub.
All right. Big bathtub, Jim. Well, I start my day out at about 4:30 in the morning, and I go to the gym and I do a CrossFit workout, whatever the workout is for the day. Usually I get home probably by 7, and then I'll either have a bowl of cereal, Special K, or I'll have eggs. And I usually like rye toast versus wheat or white. So sometimes I'll put jam on it. Other times I won't. But I'm usually a 4 or 5 day a week guy that likes to hit the gym. But I eat every morning. And like Jim, I agree that the breakfast is the most important meal. And the other thing is, like Jim, I've never had a cup of coffee.
You too? I'm surprised. Wow. Yeah. That's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are doing this podcast a little bit early for us, 9 a.m. But I think we're both holding up pretty good so far without the caffeine that 99.9% of the rest of the country instills in themselves every morning. Bianca, are you a coffee drinker?
I actually am not. Yeah. I used to drink coffee, but it's been, I think, 5 years now since I gave up caffeine altogether. I guess we're all just naturally energetic.
Works for me.
Me too.
That's what it seems to be, yeah. But that's great. Like, speaking of odds, I suppose, facts that most people don't know about us, I would love to segue into the Unabomber. And perhaps, Fitz, you could give us some more information regarding what most people don't know about him. And you can also go into detail about the shirt you're wearing today as well.
That was quite a segue. I have to think if Kaczynski drank coffee or not, because of course he lived in the cabin and he lived off of nature. So I think coffee was a rare treat for him. He would sometimes bicycle into Lincoln and stop at the general store and treat himself sometimes to coffee, then brew that up in the morning. Um, so yeah, we decided to kind of spend a little bit of time on this, tying into some other of the recent violent crimes in this country, and I pulled out some information that I kind of kept behind for a while. I did mention some of this in the book, but yeah, we'll start with the shirt. This was a shirt that I made up at in Helena, Montana. We had a whole team of agents out there and analysts after Kaczynski's arrest in April of 1996.
And Fitz, could you tell us in detail, just for the people listening as well, what's on the shirt?
Yeah, I'm looking at it backwards, but I'm pretty sure I recall what it says because I helped design this. We arrived, I think. No, we came, we arrested. No, we came, we arrested. I'm going to start this again. Maybe I need some coffee. And if you're from Philly, you say coffee. If you're from the rest of the country, you say coffee. We came, we analyzed, we arrested. And there's the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, where the UTF was located. There's some woods, and there's a cabin and a mountain, kind of a cabin on a hill, and the UTF, Unabomber Task Force analytical team. So
it's all stitching too.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I made about 30 of these. I think I picked up half the cost. Everyone else chipped in like $10. And after all these years, I only wore it once or twice a year in the house. And so I thought I'd wear it one more time. I'm going to cut this out and put it in a shadow box along with some other memorabilia from Unabomber as well as others. But it's time to kind of put some of these shirts to pass through. But I want to put it on one more time for our fans and our viewers this week. So, yeah, I also dug out, this was, it's a copy, obviously, photocopy. And sorry, Ray, no other pictures inside. But this is, I think in early 95, I'm not sure I can even read the date. No, this is November 94 date of Playboy magazine and about the Unabomber case, in which a number of the agents on board, the supervisors, were interviewed about the Unabomber case. And people may not believe this, but there actually were decent articles in Playboy back in the day, along with some pictures. But when this was published, within a few days, maybe a week or two, Thomas Moser was killed in North Caldwell, New Jersey, by a bomb sent by the Unabomber. And when I got to the task force about 6 months later, the agents, I was the profiler, the behaviorist, they sat down with me individually, collectively, but a lot of them felt guilty that maybe this interview and some of the things they said about the Unabomber in it could have caused him to then lash out and take one more victim. Now, there was even a victim after that in Sacramento, a forestry lobbyist in April of 95. So these agents were really bothered by this article. Did they do the right thing? And we knew that the Unabomber needed months to plan for these things. These devices, these improvised explosive devices, were so intricate, he couldn't just build these in a weekend. He needed time. So this bombing was very much planned, and the article had nothing to do with it. It was really a coincidence that this article was published in November of 94, and the bombing occurred then too. But they were totally unrelated. The same topic, more or less, but the Unabomber did not see this article when he decided to target Thomas Moser in North Caldwell. Interestingly, and a lot of people forget this, so the two rival magazines back then, we'll say men's magazines, were Playboy and Penthouse. Penthouse played an interesting role, and Bob Guccione, the then publisher, because the New York Times at first wasn't going to publish, or at least they were hedging on whether they would publish the manifesto or not. When Penthouse magazine jumped in like with a half-page ad in the New York Times to the Unabomber, it said, "Dear Unabomber," because they knew the Unabomber was reading the New York Times. If New York Times doesn't want to publish your manifesto, we will do it, and we will gladly do it. In fact, we'll give you a monthly column. We'll let you write whatever you want, unedited. We don't care. We want to hear from you. We think you're an interesting person, blah, blah, blah. So the Unabomber, being a good chess player that he is, wrote back to Penthouse magazine, a month or so later, and said, "We'll consider your offer if the New York Times or the Washington Post doesn't publish us, because they're like legitimate, media sources. You're kind of not. But if we do go with you, we reserve the right." He always used plural pronouns, although we knew it was one person. "We reserve the right to bomb, to kill one more person." So here's the chess game. So, of course, this letter goes public. Guccione puts it out there. The FBI gets it. New York Times gets it. So now the New York Times says, "Well, we don't publish this guy. There's blood on our hands because someone else is going to be killed." So ultimately, they did publish. That's a whole other story that people can read my books or watch A Journey to the Center of the Mind, or watch Manhunt Unabomber, and figure all those parts out. But just some little tidbits of information there between Playboy and Penthouse, and how they played sort of integral roles in the Unabomber case, directly or indirectly, and how that pales and played out in the case itself.
And I find the irony too of his involvement with Playboy and Penthouse in that respect is hearing about this fact that he was involuntarily celibate, I believe, or can you correct me? Up until his incarceration, I believe, until he had a girlfriend.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to hold another prop up. This is like an 1.5-inch thick binder that I put together with a fellow special agent, Kathy Puckett, who was part of the Unabomber Task Force. And we were commissioned. Actually, this was my idea to do this. Kathy jumped on board right away. And then we got together with Dr. Park Dietz, who was the forensic psychiatrist hired by the UTF. And this was a little side study we did, females of interest, written about by Ted Kaczynski in the TED documents and the Cabin documents. And what that means is all the letters and writings that his family turned over to us, they were the TED documents. The Cabin documents were the 1,000 separate documents we found in the cabin after his arrest. And they were just chock full of behavioral and autobiographical information about Kaczynski himself. These were written because he never thought they'd see the light of day, and these are just ways he occupied himself on cold winter days when it was below 0 degrees and he had a fire going in his electricity-free cabin, and water, no water in his cabin, etc. So this is what he did to occupy himself. So there are some interesting readings in here that we can get into a little bit. I like to bring Ray in. I mean, I think we've seen Ray in some of these recent shootings and killings, be they mass, be they singular, be they serial. It seems there's some kind of a sexual dysfunction going on. And I want to be careful. I don't want to insult anybody or categorize anyone negative. I don't really care about killers that much. But homicides are committed for certain reasons, greed, sex, maybe self-defense, war, and there's a few others. But it seems some of these ones that are difficult to describe, some of these ones that are that seem to be just off the chart in terms of something that makes any kind of sense at all to regular people. If mostly younger people under 30, and maybe arguably in the prime of their lives, but you do a lot of research between the mental health issue and also, but we're seeing sometimes sexual issues with these folks. Do you have any early input on that, Ray?
Jimmy, you're kind of right on board with the sexual component to this. You see a lot of these individuals, as they were children or younger, where sexual abuse played a part in their lives. But like in every one of these mass shooters or violent offenders, it always comes back to that point where there's a grievance. There's something that is perpetrating their reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And a lot of times it's not really known to law enforcement until we catch the individual and have the opportunity to sit down and speak with them. And you talk about the Unabomber. What was his reason for what he did? And if you look back in his background, from what I've read and having conversations with you, Jim, is that he was a subject of an experiment while he was in college. And some of the things that occurred prior to that. If you were to go back into a lot of the lives of these violent offenders, there's always seems to be a sexual component. Now, we're not saying that it's the main cause, but there is a sexual component to this that drives at least part of the behavior that they're getting involved in. But it still comes back to that grievance. What is it that set them over, the line? What caused them to cross that line? And the problem is, unlike Kaczynski, most of these other mass shooters or killers or serial offenders, some of them don't make it, but the manifest and what they leave behind, there's a purpose for leaving that behind. The purpose is, I want people to know what I've done, what I'm about, and I'm trying to leave my legacy, as you might call it. As most of these guys do, they'll take souvenirs when you talk about serial offenders to help them relive the crime over and over. It's like kind of rolling in the dirt. When you see an animal roll in the dirt, they just love that smell of it, the address themselves when they look at this type of behavior and actions that they take based upon the behavior.
And that being said, on the other side of it, you have these individuals who seem to be, this phrasing, I think it's appropriate, sexually aroused by a criminal offender. Perhaps they have something in their background that they have experienced that has led them to this bizarre kind of draw, this kind of allure. And I believe there is actually a word for it as well. It's, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I'm sorry if I butcher it, irisophilia. And the meaning is to perpetuate an outrage against another. It's the phenomenon of an individual being sexually aroused by a criminal offender. And you find that, at least you two can weigh in on this, it depends on, Manson had several women who were interested in him. Kaczynski, I believe, had a girlfriend while he was incarcerated. And there was a tragic story involved with that. But I'm curious to know from both of you more about that psychology. Why do these, for instance, women, it seems like primarily, why are they interested in these men?
Well, I guess it's this bad boy syndrome that I think, even the Seinfeld show did like an episode on it with George or something, pretending to be
I remember
the bad boy. And, but I think, like many of those episodes and many of terms like, bad boy attraction, there's definitely some truth to it, especially with younger women, maybe have some security or insecurity issues, self-image issues, whatever, and they somehow are attracted. It's one thing the kid from the other side of the tracks, I'm not sure we even use that term anymore, but that a young girl may be attracted to in senior year of high school, and she moves on or something. But it's a lot different when you're an adult woman and you're writing letters to a convicted murderer in prison that you've never met. You've only seen him on TV or in the media somewhere, and somehow you fall in love. And yeah, Kaczynski, and we can read a few of these entries into his autobiography down the line, but Kaczynski never had a girlfriend in his whole life until he went away to prison. What does that mean? And if you look at, I have a bunch of pictures. He was a decent looking guy. He was very smart. He certainly had some earning potential when he was a professor at Berkeley. And but then he all of a sudden just quit, dropped out of life, and built the cabin in Montana, and we know the rest from there. So it isn't like he couldn't have made or developed a relationship with a woman, but he was just so odd, and he was basically socially retarded. Those words that he used, and he blamed his parents so much on that they pushed him to achieve academically. He was brilliant, going off to Harvard at 16 years of age, but he felt he paid a steep price for that, in that he just didn't know how to handle his peers and the rest of society when it came to having any sort of interpersonal relationships with young men, just as buddies, and certainly with young women when he was in that age frame. So very, very difficult and situation to understand for many of us. Then you look at these brothers, the Menendez brothers. I forget exactly. They in the 80s or 90s. They killed their parents. I'll never forget. They went before the judge saying, "But we're orphans. You have to feel sorry for us, Your Honor." When they killed their own parents, and a couple of good-looking guys, I guess I can judge them that way. And women are writing them off the chart and wanting to hook up with them in prison. But back to Kaczynski, yeah, he developed a relationship with someone writing him. She was some sort of a journalist, and she actually flew out to Florence, Colorado to visit him, knowing the rules up front. There are no conjugal visits, and conjugal means where you can have sex, actually physically touch someone. There are no conjugal visits in the federal prison system. So the best she can do is get on a phone like this. There's a big inch-thick glass screen. He's on the other side, and they can put their hands up to the glass, but of course they're not even touching. Anyway, after multiple visits and a bunch of letters back and forth, they fell in love, and they decided to get engaged. And you can get married in the federal system, but again, there's no honeymoon, not even a mini moon, and so they were planning on doing that. Then she was diagnosed with cancer. Very sad. And she visited a few more times. They became more or less disabled. And Kaczynski started a writing campaign to different oncologists and doctors. He's trying to raise money for her. I'm not sure what her health insurance situation was. He's dealing with her parents. So for the first time, he's a concern. He has a woman in his life. He's a concerned SIGOT, significant other, boyfriend, whatever, but he's losing her. So I don't feel sorry about much about Kaczynski. He's killed too many people and injured so many more. But no one's happy about something like this, and certainly the poor woman, who I think only in her late 30s, died within about a year of getting engaged to Kaczynski, and he was supposedly devastated. I have no direct knowledge of this, only what I've read in the media and some of the letters he sent to other people. So this really, really messed him up. We'll come back in a few minutes, maybe, but some of the things he wrote about young women when he was a young kid in his life, and how every single time something went wrong, you could see where the seeds were planted in his brain for all this angst and vitriol down the line. Although women were never his victims, interestingly enough, it was always men. They could have been his victim if they picked up certain boxes or pieces of wood that he had designed, which had a bomb inside of it. But his victims were all men in that regard. But I have no doubt, and I was one of the first people to say this publicly, he was an incel, involuntary celibate. We just didn't have that term back then. And I have no doubt, like Ray was saying earlier, it doesn't mean it's the one particular psychological or social issue that made this person do what he did, but it contributed heavily to his decision making to start killing people, just like these mass shooters we're seeing today. I think the same principle with them.
And I think regarding like these choices that these criminals make, it's equally interesting when you go into a prison and you see these guards who help prisoners escape, or they fall for these inmates as well. What's the appeal there as well? Like, I don't even know if this would be considered a phenomenon. I'm not sure if it's as common today or if it's more common back in the day. I would love to know more about this kind of psychology as well.
Well, I can tell you, I just was in training last week with a correctional facility in the area, and we were talking about ethics. We were talking about inappropriate relationships between correctional officers and inmates. And I can tell you from my experience that it is widespread inside the prison system. And when you ask why, it goes back to what Jim said earlier. It's that bad boy complex that the female has about the male inmate. And going back to the Seinfeld, at least I know if I'm in a relationship with someone in prison, I know where they are every night.
Not right? Going anywhere.
George said that. He said, hey, I know where they're at every night. I never have to worry about them running around on me. I know where they're at. By 10 o'clock, they're in bed. It's a great feeling. But they get so overwhelmed with this. And I'll give you an example. I had an individual I arrested for bank robbery back in the 90s. And he was a very powerful individual inside the prison realm. He was called the Imam, which kind of runs the Muslim community within inside the prison system itself. And as that, when he would go into a prison, he had immediate power just because of his position having been previously incarcerated. So I go to visit him because there's no room in the federal detention center, and we have separation orders in between other individuals that are charged in the same offense. So we placed them in a county prison. And one of the county prisons was in upstate Pennsylvania. And I would run out to that prison to sit down and talk to him, proffer him, gathering intel. And I remember I went out one time, and I got called into IA, which is the internal affairs division within the prison. And they said, can we talk to you? And I said, sure. And they said, we're having a problem with your offender. I says, okay, why? I don't know why that's my problem. He's your problem here in the prison. He says he's causing a lot of problems with the inmates. He has too much power. We're going to have to ask that he be moved. And we really had no place else to put him. So I said, let me talk to him. And he said, well, he's been in a relationship with a female correctional officer. And we found these, and he got Polaroid pictures. And it's him laying on the bed in his underwear, kind of like in the Old Spice commercial with his hand up here, and he's laying in the bed. And he said, I said, these are great. I said, someone had to take these pictures. Do you know who took the pictures? They said, no, we don't. I said, let me see what I could find out. And I said, I got another question. Where did he get the camera from? They said, we don't know that either. I said, let me find out that too. So I go down and talk to him, and I ask him about these things, and he tells me, and I said, what are you doing taking pictures? He says, well, I'm getting my Christmas card list ready, sending it out to my girls outside. I said, you got to stop it. They're going to kick you out of here, and we're going to have to send you up to Rikers Island and lock you down. You don't want that, do you? And he did not. After I leave the prison, now I have the female correctional officer calling me, saying, you got to tell him to leave me alone. And I'm thinking, ma'am, that's not my problem. I did not tell you to do what you did with him. You need to figure this out on your own. And I never asked her why she did, but he told me. He said, women love bad boys. They know it. These guys know it on the inside. They love the bad boys. It's the same thing with the females. With that, it's the same thing with the males and with the female inmates. They're engaged in relationships with these female inmates. What they don't understand is that in prison, it's a very routine situation. Things don't change all that often. Everything is consistent day in and day out. So what happens is the other COs are in the process of gathering information. They're in the business of gathering intelligence. So if somebody knows, and it's very, very small, you know how they say the world is a small place? It's even smaller in prison. when you do something, everybody's going to know about it. So if you sleep with an inmate, every other inmate's going to know about it, and it's going to affect how you can do your job. And it just continues to perpetrate with these guys, and it's amazing to see, but it continues to happen. And the draw is just as it is on the outside. If someone shows you affection in any way, and the flirting, it just, people are enticed by that. Whether you're a man or a woman, you're enticed by it. You're more enticed by it if you don't get those things anywhere else. So if you're not getting it in an outside relationship, you become even more susceptible to those things inside of a prison.
Sort of the feeling of, I've had female friends who want what they cannot have, just that ever, reaching hand they cannot grasp. It's this bizarre kind of curiosity that I feel that a lot of women specifically have when it comes to being attracted towards a man. And I think with your reference toward that bad boy kind of complex, and I think it also has to deal with the common sort of daddy issues, psychology as well. Perhaps it's this very complicated kind of psychological issue. And perhaps they're trying to just fill up this void that they have as well. But it's very interesting, like I brought up this small world that the prison is, and I'm also curious to know about just the hierarchy that occurs. How I've never been in one myself, knock on wood, but I think there is an interest there in when, for instance, there's an inmate first day in prison, where you see, are there different gangs? How am I going to survive? I suppose it depends on what kind of prison it is. If it's a maximum security prison, I'm just curious about the hierarchy and what you two have to say about that.
I'll start a little bit here, just to follow what Ray was saying. It's one thing for these guys, these inmates, to use the women officers for, their sexual toys, but they also use them to escape. About 5 years ago in New York State, one of the state prisons, two guys somehow convinced this woman, I don't know if she was sleeping with both of them in storage rooms or janitorial rooms or whatever, but they definitely got it on with her, that she got them some tools and basically helped them escape. And they were on the lam for about 2 to 3 weeks. They caught her, they identified her right away. They arrested her, meaning the police did. And one escaped inmate was eventually killed by the state police. Another one was recaptured and put in prison again. And just about a year and a half ago, somewhere down south, Alabama, Mississippi, a woman, she was a pretty high, like deputy warden or something, and she hooked up with some psychopath who was in and out of prison his whole life. He was in there for a while, and they wound up escaping. She helped him escape, and it was so predictable. Anyone who knows this business like Ray and I do, she was going to wind up dead. No ands, if, or buts. And she did wind up dead, and he was arrested. So Ray does more work in prisons than I do. I've certainly visited my share of inmates over the years, but I'll just start off very basic in terms of the prison hierarchy. If obviously, if you belong to a gang, you have built-in protection there, and people will join gangs just to have that protection. But from a generic perspective, if you're a cop killer, you're pretty much at the height of the ladder in prison in terms of your power, your reputation, things like that. If you're a sexual offender, especially of little kids, you're at the bottom of the ladder, and those people have a real tough time in prison. Not too much of us have a lot of empathy for them, but nonetheless, that's how the basic prison hierarchy is set up. And of course, gangs and other factors kick in there too. And I know Ray does a lot of training with Department of Correction folks. So Ray, you can discuss where everyone fits in the middle, perhaps there.
No, Jim, we're kind of right on target here. There's a numerous cliques within the prison system, and it's based upon much like it is in society. You have the black gangs, you have the white gangs, the white supremacists, you have the Latin kings. Now you have some Muslim gangs that are starting to perform inside. But most of the time, the leaders of those gangs are well insulated. They're not the people that are on the front or that are taking the brunt of things that are occurring. They have people that are set up as barriers to protect them, so it never gets to them. But they're still calling the shots. Now, when Jim talks about these females and males that are involved in relationships, I want to take it a step further. Not as it just sexual and helping people break out, but how do you think they get things inside of a prison? I mean, they're used to bring drugs in, to bring other paraphernalia in that actually supports. A lot of times they get things that they could never get on the outside, but they're able to get on the inside because it's just available. And these prison guards are not paid much, so they use this as to supplement their income. I'll give you an example. I had a guy that was head of a gang in the city of Chester, Pennsylvania. And we put him out in one of the county prisons. And about 10:30 at night, I get a phone call. And it comes to my cell phone. And I pick it up. It's a number, and I go, hello. And the guy says, hey, Ray, how you doing? So I say to this guy, I said, how are you making this phone call? And he goes, oh, I got a cell phone. I said, how did you get the cell phone? One of the guards brought it in for me. Really? I said, that is so cool. I'm telling him this so he gives me more information. And in about a week, I'm going to put this together and lock up the guard that did this. Or at least have the county do that. Well, I'm sitting and talking to him. So I say, well, how were you able to get it? He says, well, I have my girlfriend on the outside give this guy a pair of Jordans. And he bought the cell phone in. I said, oh, wow. I said, that is neat. I said, what kind of Jordans? I'm getting into all the things that don't matter just to kind of build up my trust with them. So I said, what else are they doing? He goes, I get alcohol, I get marijuana, I get coke. And I said, I'm like the guy in here if you need something. I said, wow, that is so cool. He says, I have 3 different guys that are doing this for me. I said, that's great. He goes, Ray, I actually have conjugal visits after hours, like from midnight to like 3 in the morning, out in the parking lot of the prison. And I said, really? I said, they let you out? And he goes, yeah, with my girlfriend. She comes up in the car. He says, it's great. He says, I don't mind being here at all. This is a great place to be. So here's individuals telling me this, and I'm going, you've got to be kidding me.
Wow.
Here's people that are locked up, and we're taking away their rights. Or are we? Are we making it even easier for them? Many of the offenders, when they go into prison, don't mind going to prison because all of their friends are locked up too. So when they go into these county prisons, even state prisons, it's like a reunion. And they feel very comfortable being inside these prisons with these individuals because it's like coming home. Yeah, I got caught with this or I got caught with that. It's amazing what they tell us once they're on the inside. It's not that bad here. For you, me, and Jim, it'd be like, I don't know if I can handle this. But these guys and gals, they think it's great.
Wow. So it's basically, like you said, a mini reunion where they get to reestablish their power in a smaller setting.
A tangential sort of story I experienced in my New York FBI days. I was assisting a rookie agent bring some bank robber out of the MCC, Manhattan Correctional Center, where he was being held on trial. He was cooperating. He's going to give some information about some fellow bank members. And he just asked as part of the deal, could his girlfriend be in, come and see him that day. So we kind of set up, we took him out. and into the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York. Brought him up. He was in cuffs the whole time, and there's his girlfriend, and they thank you. They put him in the office, close the door. There's no way he can go anywhere. We're like 17th floor of this high-rise building, and I'm just outside talking with one of the attorneys I know, and the rookie agent comes back to me. He's red. His eyes are like this. Fitz, my inmate's having sex on the floor with his girlfriend. What do I do? I said, are there any doors he can escape in there? No. I said, is he cooperating, giving you good info? Yeah. Let him finish. and I said, you handle it. And he gave him like 2 more minutes. I have a feeling the guy probably didn't need that much time to do what he wanted to do. And next thing you know, the conjugal visit, which we didn't purposely set up, but I noticed she was wearing a dress. Who knows? We don't have to get graphic here, but she may have come prepared for this quick rendezvous, and so he had his little conjugal visit. Boy, did he give us some good information after that, which all proved to be valid. So there's a factor which certainly could contribute in that regard to getting more information out of these guys in prison, but we'd have to have it very much controlled. My theory about prisons has been cut everyone's time in half. Sounds like I'm a real liberal, progressive guy, get them out of prison sooner. But no, cut their time in half, but they get single cells like Florence, Colorado, the Supermax, and they're in there 23 hours a day. They make it weight room benefits, whatever. That way it cuts out all the gang situations there too. So you're cutting their time down, but you're making them really think about what they did to earn their time in there. So it would take expanding the prisons, making them larger if you're going to give people single cells. But that's how they do it in Florence, Colorado, the Supermax, where Kaczynski was for a number of years, along with some other bad guys. And I think ultimately we'd have a better parole program. These people got out with that kind of stay in prison, as opposed to just these wide open general population where all these gangs are formed and all kinds of bad stuff happens.
So is that what you? I'd like to get your take on this as well, Ray. Before we close, we can end with this discussion regarding the prison system and the justice system. That being said, what are your thoughts on how most prisons in this country function, at least from what you both have experienced? Do you feel like they could be better? Do you feel like it should be the current state of it is fine, or do you see room for improvement?
I think you say function, it's more of a dysfunction. I mean, when you look at the prison system itself, the guards, the COs, both on the federal level, and the state level, and the local level, they just maintain order. The prisons are run by the inmates. They are. They have their own justification, punishment systems. They have everything to do it. You're just there to monitor it. That's it. It's like watching a zoo. You don't control what goes on inside the cage, but you can control what goes on outside the cage. It's nothing more than that. It's a housing unit. You're warehousing people. That's kind of what it is.
It's a very good point.
I'm going to let Ray finish with the prison part, but I've kind of promised a few times in our talk today about reading at least one clip from Kaczynski's early days. So since he is still in prison and we're kind of on this topic and theme, let's go back to his early days. This is very early, actually, a little segment I found. And this is how, so think of a serial killer, which is what Kaczynski turned to be. But even as a 10-year-old boy, this is how he was thinking about a young girl. And there's plenty of examples as he went off to high school, Harvard, University of Michigan, and even later in life. So we'll just end it, just a few paragraphs here. So this is from Kaczynski's autobiography that he never expected anyone to read, but we took it as being important about how he related to women. And again, this whole incel concept, even though we didn't use the term back then. So here we go. When I was 10 years old in 5th grade, there was a girl in the class named Darlene. She had long black hair and was beautiful. There was another girl in class, a blonde, who was nothing because she had a dull, stolid personality. But Darlene was something special because she had a lively, saucy personality. In some way, I forget how, there developed a kind of war in the class, a running verbal conflict that went on intermittently for weeks or months, one side consisting nominally of the girls and the other side consisting of the boys. But by and by, I began to notice a very disgusting phenomenon. One by one, I detected the leading boys in the class holding soft, sweet conversations with Darlene. The boys' end of the war soon collapsed. The little vixen was reaching a certain age where she was beginning to feel her power, and she was using it. I was filled with contempt for these guys who had permitted themselves to be conquered so easily. A few days before, they had hated Darlene, and now they were kissing their erstwhile enemy's ass. The truth is that I was beginning to feel certain soft temptations toward Darlene myself, but I refused to admit this to myself. I was sternly determined not to be conquered like the others had been. I forced myself to hate her. And he goes on a bit about Darlene and the other guys in class, but you can see this vitriol and this vehemence that he was building up against not only the girls who he really didn't approach at all. There's so many stories in here from across the aisle at high school, in Harvard, at Michigan. He's just staring at these young women, and maybe they'd smile as they get up and walk away. And he'd go months and just have this fantasy about them. And then he never would approach them. And then he'd see her talking to some other guy, and he'd want to kill the guy. I mean, he didn't do it, but this is where the seeds of all this anxiety and hatred were, began their fomentation process. And it's nice to have something like this. That's why in an earlier episode we're saying, put the manifesto or whatever it's being called of this Nashville killer out there. If they're generous enough, and if you're not watching this, I have air quotes up, but if they're generous enough to leave this kind of writing behind, let's get it out there so the public knows what to look for, what to keep an eye out for future mass murderers, serial killers, whatever they may be. And we owe it to our own society to do this. I know my old unit, the behavioral analysis unit, supposedly has these documents now. Maybe they're listening. Maybe some bosses out there in Nashville. Get this thing out there. The public has a right to see it. We want to know how future killers are thinking. So when you put the signs up, the billboards, the newspaper ads, whatever, see something, say something, let us know what the hell to look for.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. We need to be prepared. We need to, in order to prevent another massacre, another shooting, something, we need to understand why, or at least to a certain extent. And like you said, by reading manifesto, by understanding them more, we'd have more of a chance to prevent another horrible tragedy from occurring.
Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, hopefully. And did you have any more to say regarding the prison system, Ray? I know we had to kind of jump back and forth a bit.
No, that's fine. I think we're good.
Okay, great. Well, if there is nothing else, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Ray and Fitz, and thank you so much for your insight regarding today's several topics. I hope that our viewers and our listeners have at least become more enlightened and enriched and educated by our topics about Kaczynski, and of course, the most important, what is more important, wheat versus rye, that kind of breakfast. That's always an important discussion. That being said, thank you again for joining us today. Please feel free to follow us on social media at Cold Red Podcast. And until next time, stay present and stay alert.